All right, so our third reader is David Semonchik, who is a short fiction writer from Batavia, Illinois. He holds a BA in creative writing in Spanish from Knox College, an MA in English from UC Davis, and an MFA in fiction and screenwriting from the Michener Center for Writers at UT Austin. He's currently working on a collection of stories, and with his friend Hallie, who you heard earlier, is the other half of Jerboa Lit. And just to remind you, they are holding their first writing contest this coming January. When I asked him about a particular book, he mentioned The Details by Ya Ginberg. And I'm just kind of getting a sense here, if you really want to find some really interesting literary fiction, then you should find both David and Hallie on either Storygraph or Goodreads or something, because it sounds like they have some pretty sophisticated, interesting tastes from a Swedish author and then Scottish noir, so I'm kind of intrigued. Anyway, could you please just clap David to the stage, please?
Hello, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to Water Street and Republic of Letters for having me. And yeah, just like Hallie's stories earlier, mine is based on a prompt that I was given by Hallie, and it was written in 48 hours. If that sounds like a fun thing to do, have I got a contest for you? Come and see me at the table afterwards and we can talk about it. The prompt for this one was a science fiction story written at a high school prom with a coffee filter. This story is called Night is Young. It wasn't until Lime reached into her handbag and produced the small white rose boutonniere that I remembered I was supposed to have bought her a corsage. She pinned the flower through the lapel of my blazer, her large eyes not meeting mine, and I asked if she would wait for a moment while I put something together. I hurried off to the kitchen, and from the drawer under the microwave, I grabbed a few coffee filters and a pair of scissors. I folded the filters up like I was making a paper snowflake and clipped around the edges until they were petal-like. Unfurled, they looked like a child's drawing of a petunia, but bunched up in the middle to give them some volume and held together with a safety pin, they looked good enough to wear. I hid the filter flowers behind my back and told Lime to close her eyes, forgetting for a moment that her eyelids were transparent. But she smiled and covered her face with her hands. I pinned the corsage to her dress, and when she saw what I had done, she gasped and nearly leapt into my arms for a hug. "How did you build this?" she asked, and I told her that my mom and I used to make crafts like this all the time. "Please," she said, "show me. I love it." We weren't the last to arrive at the school, but after teaching her the flowers, and then paper airplanes, a fortune teller, a dollar bill t-shirt, and an origami crane, we were quite a bit more than fashionably late. "I was beginning to think you were going to miss your big Earth prom, Miss Lime," said Dr. Clay, the English teacher, opening the door to the gymnasium. "Looking good, Dano," he told me, giving my new paper rose a flick. The dance's theme was Our Family Beyond the Stars, the literal translation of the Cetaean name for Earthlings. The theme was partially meant to celebrate Lime and the 5 others from YZ Cetae who had been studying with us all year, and partially in honor of the 6 students from Dubuque Senior High who were sent as part of the exchange program to Lime's school, 12 light years away. They were all honors students, no one I ever had a class with, though they were often on my mind that year, as we watched their memory videos at school assemblies, and were encouraged to record our memories for them as well. We entered the gym just as the DJ started playing The Whale, everyone's favorite Xenopop song that year. Lime grabbed my hand, and we ran into the crowd of students, all doing the spouting blowhole move that went along with the dance. Cupping her hands around my ear, Lime shouted to be heard above the music, "I love spouting!" Then she whooped and threw both her hands in the air as if rising from the bottom of the sea. It was just past 11 when we left the school, Lime's garter around my elbow, my tie draped like a boa around her neck. After 4 hours of dancing, the nighttime breeze felt heavenly on my sweat-soaked head. I could smell the scent of my body mingling with the musk of the cologne I borrowed. Lime, too, smelled even more strongly of almonds than the Cetaeans usually did, and her hair, so perfectly arranged at the beginning of the night, was something of a wreck. I wish now that I had asked her for an after picture, the 2 of us under the streetlight in the parking lot, looking like gorgeous teenage hell. But I hadn't realized yet just how much I'd miss her. I had my father's car for the evening, a beat-up gasser with a cracked windshield and a sketchy autopilot. I spoke Lime's address, and we pulled out into the flow of post-prom traffic, my foot hovering the brake like I'd been taught, just in case the car flipped out. Without the music pounding in our ears, it seemed like neither of us knew what to say. Mrs. Roberts, Lime's host mom, lived closer to the school than I realized, and before I knew it, we were turning down her street. Just then, Lime spoke. "Would you mind taking me for a drive? Just a little longer?" I pulled the car over to the curb and asked her where she'd like to go. "Could we see the river tonight? I love so much water." There was a little park on the Iowa side of the Mississippi that I liked going to with my mother when I was a child, with a wide cobblestone river walk and a sandy shoreline along the water, and a pavilion where we would listen to folk singers sometimes in the summer. I told the car to take us there, and Lime settled back into her seat, her fingers entwined behind her head. Her coffee filter corsage looked as though it had wilted, a little damp and misshapen, but she still wore it even then, and that pleased me to see. As we cruised through downtown, it struck me that I had never been out so late before, in my own car, ever in my life. My father wasn't big on curfews over the weekend, and as long as I came home in one piece, he didn't seem to mind whatever I got up to. A crazy thought came to me. What if we just kept driving? I could show her Madison, or the skyline in Chicago. If Lime wanted to see water, we could go to Lake Michigan and walk along the beach until sunrise. But as we pulled into the parking lot beside the river, I was too nervous to ask if she wanted anything more. Lime stepped out of the car, and I followed her down the path to a bench just off the riverwalk. The lilac bushes were beginning to bloom, and their scent surrounded us like the gentle yellow lights of the pavilion. It was quiet there, cars shushing past on the highway behind us, the lapping of the river against the rocks as it flowed by. Lime took a seat on the bench, and I sat down beside her. She put her arm around me and laid her head against my shoulder. After having my hands around her waist all evening, I felt anxious touching her without music as pretext. But as dumb as I've always been, I still knew when someone needed to be held. I put my arms around her, and we sat like that for a long while, listening to each other breathe. And then, just like that, she sat up and leaned her face into mine. Aside from their slightly oversized eyes and transparent eyelids, the primary physiological difference between us and the Cetaians was their mouths, which were upside down, their tongues hanging from where we have our hard palates. It made certain aspects of our languages difficult for them to pronounce and gave Lime a distinctive accent, but it also opened a world of possibilities for making out. The tips and tops of our tongues meeting but not obstructing, not fighting for the same space in the kiss. I wove my fingers through her hair, and we kissed like we might never see each other again, like soon she would be going away forever, which was true. After several moments, I opened my eyes and saw Lime considering my face through her eyelids. She opened her eyes too, and rubbed the tip of her nose against the bridge of mine. "Earth kisses," she said. I loved that, and we laughed, cheek to cheek. It occurred to me that of all the words Lime knew in English, the one she used most was love. She kissed me again with just her lips. Then her phone rang, and I knew our night together was over, and we would have to go back home. But before we left, one last thing. Lime dug around in her handbag, then held out the fortune teller I had folded for her before the dance. "Please," she said, "show me again how it works." I tucked my fingers into the paper cones and asked her to think of a question she wanted answered. I told her to pick a number, 4, then opened and shut the fortune teller 4 times. I told her to pick another, and she said 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I asked her for one last number, and she wanted 2, so I unfolded the flap with the number 2 written on it and showed her the word beneath. "Oh, Daniel," she said, "that makes me so happy to see." She tucked the fortune teller back in her bag, and I took her back to Mrs. Roberts. I never found out what she asked of the fortune teller, but the word she saw was yes. Thank you.